Okay, hello everyone. We are happy to be here and present you a very interesting topic on the mark of the web. This is an increasingly relevant topic to discuss with the latest announcements by Microsoft and the latest increase in trend on containers. Arnold is our leading threat researcher. He will be leading this presentation. He will dive into what we see as a current landscape. He will get into the different definitions of how this works and how attackers bypassing market of the web, and what can we really do with that. So we'll really dive into very interesting and cool stuff that basically the core researchers, Morphisec core researchers, see on a daily basis. I myself, as Michael Gorelick, I'm the Chief Technology Officer. So Arno, take the lead and go ahead. Let's start.
Okay, thank you, Michael. So, yeah, as you introduced, it all started earlier this year, the change in the landscape, when Microsoft released two announcements regarding the macro-based Office documents. And in the first announcement, Microsoft disabled Excel version 4 macros by default. And in the second announcement, we saw that Microsoft introduced a default change for Office apps that run macros. And this default change is actually to disable those macros that obtained from the internet. And these two announcements together affected the threat landscape quite drastically as before that and till the actual implementation of the changes. Many well-known malware families were delivered macro weaponized documents that were either attached to an email or downloaded directly from the internet. And among these malware families, we see Cagbot and MOTW, in addition to also many threat actors and APTs that using macro weaponized documents as their initial infection vector, such as Do Not, APT29, Fin7, and many more. And in the following graph, you can see quite a drastic decline in the macro-based document prevention for Morphisec.
I'll add on top of Arnold. So definitely you see here as a representing telemetry from the different customers, the visibility that we have. And this is just an example of the different threats that we saw before originating from Microsoft Office. And now you see a drastic decline during February, a bit of increase back in March because they were kind of rolling back and then re-enabled those disable of macro, and then going basically on the lower side, only some indications due to more older versions of Office and other more legacy kind of customers. So based on the graph, it looks great. I mean, it looks like Microsoft done an amazing thing and killed this attack vector, right? Looks very optimum. But hey, I'll ask you, Arnold, right? So no more macros. How normal business operate then, right? It's basically killing this functionality.
Yeah, well, yeah, no, exactly. Because when Microsoft released the announcement, they released this the following macro block flowchart that indicates how this operation is going to work. And as you can see, marked in red, step number 7 is the new addition. Let's outline those evaluation steps and see how it works. So as you can see, it all starts when the user is opening a VBA macro file that has the mark of the web attribute on it. And for those of you who don't familiar with the mark of the web, you can think of it as just an attribute that indicates whether the file was downloaded from the internet or not, if it has this mark of the web. And so if we has this mark of the web file attribute and the VBA macro file, so the evaluation starts with step number 2 actually. And this step checks whether the document is from a trusted location. And the trusted location is a list of paths that you can configure within your Office application. So if the document is from one of those paths, the macros will be enabled. Otherwise, the evaluation will continue to step number 3, that checks if the macro is signed and trusted on the machine. And that actually answers your question, Michael, as IT and security administrators can sign their macros or plugins and distribute those signatures among the company's machines. And if that's the case, macros are enabled. Otherwise, the evaluation will continue to steps number 4A and 4B. And these steps checks whether cloud or group policies are pre-configured to block or unblock the macros. And if that's not the case, so the evaluation will continue to step number 6, that checks if the user previously opened the file before the change in the default behavior and selected the good old enable content from the taskbar. And if that's the case, so the next time the user will open the document, the file will be considered trusted and the macros will be enabled. If none of the steps met the requirements, so the evaluation will continue to step number 7, that's where the new change takes effect. And the macros will be blocked by default, and the user will be shown with this red trust bar. And of course, you can remove this taskbar with a few clicks, but not intuitively as it was with the old enable content, enable macros as it was before.
Yeah, looks like a small change that introduced a significant impact. But looking at this kind of chart, looks like a lot of single point of failure. So basically, the options for the attacker to break this chain are there are enough options, right? There are options on the trusted locations, on the signed certificates, even on previously open. So definitely, and I see as an opportunity for a growing landscape in the future. But as we are discussing in this presentation about mark of the web, and it's the first thing we see here in the chart, let's dive in a bit more into what is it, this mark of the web attribute, and how is it used. Let's go on with that.
Yes, so mark of the web as a concept, it's something that allows Windows to tag files on the local file system with the information from which the files originated. And this mark of the web attribute is being achieved by creating a thing that called alternate data stream. And alternate data stream is an NTFS file system feature that allows more than one data stream to be associated with a file name. And using the format, as you can see, marked in red, the file name, colon, and the stream name. And when you download the file, for example, from a browser or a file that attached to an email, so that those applications create this data stream, alternate data stream, and that named zone.identifier. And the zone identifier adds a zone ID that can be one of the 5 zone IDs you can see on the screen with some additional data that indicates from which the zone the file originated. And you can see that there are 5 zone IDs. The zone IDs that are below 3 considered safe from the local computer or the internet, local internet. And those with zone ID 3 and above are considered unsafe, and that's actually what the mark of the web is.
So how is it? I mean, it's a great indicator for where the file comes from. How is it being used today in this security landscape?
So there are a couple of applications that use this mark of the web attribute, and those can be applications such as Microsoft Office, that we saw the diagram, right? And it can be by showing the red trust bar, for example, and this will affect micro documents that fetch through remote template injection or macros that documents that attach to an email or downloaded from the internet. And another option is Windows Defender Smart Screen that prompting the user before running unsafe executables or link files or scripts or any other file format that supports this. And another thing is the security vendors that can run anti-malware check or save those metadata and use them later. Um,
Right, they use
and
it for basically to optimize their scanning to avoid scanning everything. And basically
right,
utilize many of the mark of the web to just focus on those things that were downloaded. So if you definitely tamper with those, you'll actually tamper with the next generation scanning, etc. Right? So let's go into examples. Maybe you can provide some examples for bypassing this mark of the web.
yes, so we have the following example that tries to deliver MOTW through a social engineering attempt to, and if you remember in the diagram that Microsoft provided with the announcement, in step number 2, which is actually the beginning, it checks whether the file is from a trusted location. And you can see that here the attacker tried to put an image on the first cell that looks like instruction that allows the victim to copy the document to one of those trusted location, default trusted location, and yeah, to see the content of the document properly. Uh, that's quite in my opinion, a lame attempt, but
I mean, social engineering works, right? Social
exactly.
it's enough for one guy to be convinced in the organization. So whether it works by previously convincing,
Definitely.
enabling macro, you need to be a bit more sophisticated, obviously, but I believe it will work. So any more examples that you can
Yeah,
demonstrate?
so you have the following example, which is using virtual disk containers, which is the most popular method today, adopted by attackers. And it can be ISO, image, VHD, and more. And threat actors actually switched to this method simply because of the fact that virtual disk containers won't propagate the mark of the web attribute to its content. And you can see in the image on the left, we have mark of the web attribute on an ISO container that downloaded from the internet. And on the right, we see that the ISO are mounted in this example to drive E, and the file, the document inside the mounted drive doesn't have the mark of the web attribute. And this happens due to the fact that virtual disk containers mount the files in the container with the read-only attribute. So that actually, when the Windows tries to write the mark of the web attribute on it, which is an alternate data stream, it fails to do so.
Right. Yeah, the browser fails to write it down. Right.
Yeah, so you can see here, this is example of a typical infection chain that many infamous malware families, such as Cagbot, iState, Bumblebee, and many more use. And you can see that all the chains leads to virtual disk container. In this example, it's an ISO, but you can see that all roads leads to those virtual disk containers, whether if it's from a zip or attached directly to an email or downloaded from the internet or dropped from HTML smuggling or any other technique. And from that virtual disk container, we usually see link file or any other script that loads the payload. And
It looks
so,
like definitely picking up by more and more threat vectors, even though those techniques were known even before Microsoft announced on the macro disablement. So obviously, because Mark of the Web is relevant to those cases as well, I think attackers just shifted to the places that work, as always, the easier ones. So with all this threat landscape, Arnon, what really Microsoft does about it? Do we have any solution there that will remediate the risk?
so Microsoft was well aware of those abused methods, and actually 1 month ago, exactly, they released a patch for several in the wild bypasses for the mark of the web. And there is two CVs that address these bypasses. And the first one is referring to the virtual disk containers that not propagating the mark of the web to to its attribute, to its contents. And the second CV is actually split to two fixes. The first one is similar to what happened with the virtual disk container, which didn't propagate the mark of the web to its contents due to the read-only flag. And the same happened with zip archives that had read-only files inside. And the second one simply fixing a bug that when opening a file from within a zip or Windows 11 didn't add the bypass and the mark of the web attribute to the file itself. And we can see that
Expected with new functionalities introduced, you also have a higher attack surface, right?
yes, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And we can see that the same that happened with virtual disk container was also happening with different archive applications that didn't propagate the mark of the web attribute to its content, not because of the read-only flag, the read-only files, but just because they didn't support it simply. And you can see that from May 2022 till November, the number of applications, archive applications that support mark of the web propagations doubled itself. So we can see that there is an awareness among the developers regarding the importance of the mark of the web attribute.
Well, but the other, the other part of this image basically says that the attackers and the hackers can abuse those other formats that still do not support mark of the web for the delivery of the threat, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. And we can see one example of exploitation, the second CV, that actually takes us back 1 year ago. And this example was abused to deliver the RURET, which is a commercial remote administration tool. And you can see again on the left side, we have zip file that downloaded from the internet that, of course, has the mark of the web attribute. Whereas on the right side, we have the decompressed contents, which is a link file that has the read-only attribute without the mark of the web. And that's exactly the bug there with the read-only files that cannot write an alternate data stream on those files. We have another example, and this example is abusing mark of the web bypass that isn't patched actually as of today. And it was spotted in the wild in a campaign that covered by HP in October. And this campaign was spreading Magnibear, which is a single client ransomware. And as you can see, the infection here starts with a web download from an attacker-controlled website, that asks the user to download a zip file containing an JavaScript inside that lures the victim to be an important antivirus or Windows 10 software update. And this JavaScript looks as the follows, and you can see that it has the mark of the web attribute because the zip that had it propagated to its contents. And you can see that it has some signature in it. And once this JavaScript file is being executed, Smart Skin application tries to validate the signature and it fails to do so due to the fact that this signature is malformed. And actually,
I will add just before you demonstrate how it works. I mean, just in kind of clear guidelines for us as a malware researcher, we are well familiar with those signatures. For the larger audience, while files are, you can check out their signatures, the hash, their SHA-2, the scripts are usually have those signatures within the script itself. This is an example of a signature for JavaScript. Similar signatures you can attach to PowerShells, to VB scripts, etc. And basically, when Arnold says that those signatures are malformed, remind you that the chain that the investigation chain that we showed on the first slides, that go through the mark of the web, the trusted sites, the validation of signatures, etc. And the thing is that, hey, you can fail this cycle by malformed signature. So I'll add on top after Arnold will represent the example, just to put things in the right perspective. Those are signatures that are also validated as part of those chains. So let's see an example.
okay, so actually, a couple of days or a week after the HP posted this campaign, a security researcher named Will spotted that bypass and took the exact same corrupted signature used in the Magdeburg campaign and used it to pop a calculator. I see it's not what, oh, it is. And use it to pop a calculator. And you can see that it downloads two calcs, and you can that being executed through a JavaScript file, and one of them has the exact same corrupted signature, while the other don't. And you can see that one of them did prompt the warning, and the other not. And you can guess that that's the one without the with the malformed signature.
Yeah. So the bug is, right, the bug is essentially because by default it first validates the signatures, and the default is go execute without whether mark of the web exists or not, right?
Yeah.
And the signature valid, go and check mark of the web, right? And still very much vivid, right?
Yeah, exactly. So and the same that happened actually a couple of weeks later, after Will published this video on Twitter, we saw that Kagbot and IcedID took the exact same signature and embedded those in their JavaScript infection chain. And they also took this exact same signature and embedded them in the VPS files, actually. That's quite nice to see that they are tracking.
But troubling because it's still not solved, right?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, so in this case, I think we see a prevention from our, as an example, from one of our customers, right? It's a Kagbot prevention. In this case, again, right, we see a JavaScript delivered through container, also abusing allow listing technique by executing through registrar, right? And essentially, it's someone that double clicks on a JavaScript within the container. And because mark of the web is not basically validated, the JavaScript just executes. right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we see enough of those during our investigations and prevention events for Morphisec. So let's move to the takeaways, right? I think if I summarize for now, I know you can check out the questions while I'm summarizing the takeaways. By the way, we did see, we started from macro. We saw that the threat landscape definitely changed due to those announcements for the goods. Office documents are less abused right now. We assume that for the long run, there will be new ways to bypass, exactly as we demonstrated, social engineering that will allow you to copy those files into different folders, or other techniques, whether it's through certificates or whether to convince one first execution through templates and then to convince again, patching, using again non-supporting containers to deploy that, bypass all kind of patching that Microsoft has done. There's quite a lot of validations across the cycle that we present on the second slide before the malware executes. So a lot of places and locations to get in and really temper the execution. So this threat landscape will definitely change more during the next year. We will be tracking it and we'll update as Morphisec intercepts new threats with the additional webinar. As for question, I think someone asked here a question about the social engineering of the macro itself, whether you need administrator privileges to copy into those paths. I don't know what
So yes, that's why I thought it's a lame technique, but as Michael said, it's enough for couples to do that, and the attackers are good to go.
Yeah, I mean, there are enough environments with administrator execution and WQC configurations, user account controls, and there will be more ways to basically convince people to do the same. But yes, the answer is you require administrator privileges to copy those files, right? There are more questions, but any of those questions will be answered by email. So please, we'll address those following the webinar. I want to thank everyone to attend this webinar. I hope we shared interesting content today. Feel free to approach us by email. Yeah, thank you. Thank you,
Thank you,
Arnold.
guys. Thank you, Michael.